name is still not final. Currently, we have one refugee navigator position that works in tandem with our local nonprofits and various sectors of government. Looking at the projections for the upcoming fiscal year, we are going to continue to welcome new Americans. Between October 1st, 2023 and September 30th, 2024, we expect that 7,434 new arrivals will be coming to Maricopa County, and the majority of these will continue to be resettled in Phoenix. We have a duty to continue to provide proactive policy that will strengthen our economy and deliver the promise of a better life to these individuals. I'm very honored to be able to do that alongside partners like the International Rescue Committee Arizona chapter. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome IRC Executive Director Aaron Rippenkroger.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Ansari. It's an honor to be here with you today and with all of you. I am with the International Rescue Committee, a nonprofit that helps newly arrived refugees integrate and thrive in their new communities. I'm here along with Connie Phillips, the CEO and President for Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest, and Kitty Marquez, Program Manager with Catholic Charities. And we are, on behalf of our agencies, we want to thank Mayor Gallego, Vice Mayor Ansari, Senator Bravo, former Senator Kaiser for helping lead the way for the families and the communities that we serve here in Arizona. Refugees have played a vital role in the Arizona story for decades, bringing with them so much more than the things they carry. Among these is Omid Hakimi, his wife Humaida, and their 3 children, who were welcomed in Arizona in 2021 as part of Operation Allies Welcome. In Afghanistan, Omid worked as an assistant for the U.S. Army's National Security Advisor, and Humaida worked as a school teacher, gaining skills and experience that would be of great value in any community around the world. Once they arrived in Arizona, Omid began working part-time as an Uber driver and an Amazon delivery person. But then Omid had to have an emergency surgery and could not continue working during his recovery. Fortunately, with the resources that we received from the city's American Rescue Plan Act Fund, we were able to provide targeted assistance to the Hakimi family to make sure that they could stay in their home, support their children, and we were also able to connect Humaida with the city's mobile career unit program, where she was hired on as an after-school specialist with the city. Both Omid and Humaida are healthy, working, and contributing to their new community today. And these are the types of targeted interventions that all of our organizations can provide thanks to our partnership with the city. And we look forward to sharing more information about that at the Resource Fair next week and to growing our ongoing collaboration with the city's new Office of Refugee Support. At the state level, I want to again commend the legislatures and the governor for passing Arizona Senate Bill 1563, the New American Study Committee. It's another example of the long bipartisan tradition we have for welcoming refugees in Arizona, and it recognizes that the new American talent pool in Arizona holds a wealth of skills and experience that we must maximize on, not only for the new Americans, but also given the labor needs and the labor shortages we have in Arizona's growing industries. We are immensely grateful for the city and the state's investment in and the commitment to our new neighbors as they contribute to our vibrant Arizona communities. Their resilience and ambition, along with the state and city support, will strengthen their journey towards becoming new Americans and strengthen our community and our country for the future. So it's my honor now to introduce former Senator Steve Kaiser, who has played such a central role in these efforts in recent years.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Thank you for everyone being here. Thank you for city leadership. Appreciate your support in all this. My name is Steve Kaiser, former state senator from LD2, which is North Phoenix. And really, the reason I've been so passionate about the refugee population in Arizona kind of has 2 fronts. So growing up here in Phoenix, I was actually an exchange student 3 different times, one of which was through the Sister Cities program here in Phoenix. And so I've always been fascinated and intrigued by foreign cultures, and being an exchange student and having that interest led me to a branch in the U.S. Army called Civil Affairs. And I served in Afghanistan as a captain and civil affairs team leader, and my whole job was to develop relationships with local Afghan leaders, whether they're government leaders, village elders, understand the human terrain in the areas that we were operating in, build relationships with them, and then we would actually do projects like build roads, clinics, schools, things like that. And I couldn't do that without interpreters because I did not speak the language. There was multiple languages there, and a lot of them did not speak English, and so interpreters were such a critical role. And we were part of what was called a provincial reconstruction team. So it was a mix of Army and Air Force, Reserve and active duty. And we had a pool of interpreters, probably 10 to 12 attached to our unit. And they rode alongside with us every day. We had one interpreter that was always with me inside in the meetings, another interpreter always outside with the security, and we would do everything together. And so you become very close with your interpreters. And when I finished my tour in 2008, I came home and I stayed in touch with all my interpreters through messaging apps like Facebook and WhatsApp, things like that. And we got several of them from the time from 2008 to 2021-ish into the United States through the regular process. However, when Afghanistan fell, it was a very dangerous time for interpreters, as you all know, because the Taliban was targeting them because they were so close to Americans and because their role was so important to getting the job done. Because when you're fighting an insurgency, the best way to fight an insurgency is to build relationships with the people. And so they knew that was a critical piece. And so they wanted to harass and kill any interpreters they could still find. So one of my interpreters, along with me and the other guys that we served with, we helped get him out, along with our Congressman David Schweikert, helped a great deal. Him and his family got out of Afghanistan barely. In fact, he was negotiating with the gate guards when they were still U.S. Marines, hundreds of people at the gate. He went to the gate, waved his papers, and the U.S. Marines brought him in, and they said, okay, get on the plane, you gotta go. There's hundreds of people outside the gate, keep in mind. He said, I can't go, I have to go back and get my family. And they said, if you come back, there's no guarantee we're still gonna be at the gate. So he left to get his family, and he went to a side gate, but when he got there, the Taliban was now the gate guards, if you can believe that. There's still U.S. Marines on the base, and there's Taliban as gate guards. And so he had to very kind of quietly stand off in the background until the Marines, for whatever reason, came back up to the guard, and the Taliban left the guard post, and then he got his whole family through. So that's how harrowing it was for these interpreters to get out. Because if the Taliban had found out he was an interpreter, they would have killed him on the spot. And there's nothing the Marines could have done. So he gets here to the United States after months in Germany, getting verified and vetted, and he spends months in Virginia. And then we fought hard to get him here to Arizona, because I knew the cost of living would be the best place for him to live. They were trying to send him to Boston. And I thought it'd be better to have him here because he's got a support network and the cost of living is better. And so he came here, and I kind of became his de facto sponsor, trying to help him through the process. And that's when I realized the process is all over the place. There's city resources, state resources, there's a million agencies and nonprofits. And I asked, what is the list of resources he gets and what are the resources he doesn't get? And I couldn't even get that answer. And at the time I was an elected official in state government, and I still couldn't open any doors. And so I knew there was a massive problem with efficiency for refugees coming here, getting them up to speed and getting them adequate housing and jobs right away. So we started this process last year, not this last session, but a year before last session, with a proclamation honoring military interpreters, because there was a lot of public angst about Afghans coming here. There's a large wave of them. Some folks were concerned, and so we wanted to make sure we had a very public presence saying, these are our allies and friends, and we will support them with everything we have. And so we started with that proclamation. And then during the interim, I became very close with the International Rescue Committee, and we said, what can we do about making things more efficient? And as we discussed a bill idea, it came very quickly realized that this is such a complex issue, it deserves a study committee. And I know the city folks will agree with me that sometimes the legislature pushes things down that they don't fully think about. And we have very short amount of time in the legislature to actually debate and discuss bills. So you'll be appreciative of the fact that I said, slow down, let's do a study committee. At least once in my life I did that. And so we decided to do a study committee, and we call it the New American Study Committee. Other states have done this, so we used other state legislation as kind of a model. And really, we just wanted to get all the people together in a room after session, all the state agencies, nonprofits, community groups, members, and discuss, okay, where are the gaps? What are the roadblocks? How can we smooth things out? make it more streamlined. And so that's the goal of what we're doing. And I was very excited to see we had super majority support in both chambers, which was really exciting. This is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. In fact, most of the no votes were people that just hate study committees, if you can believe that. And these are experienced legislators, but some people just hate study committees. I love study committees. I think we should be digging into these complex topics more deeply. So what we hope to accomplish at the end of this is solutions. And it doesn't have to be legislative solutions. It could be agency solutions. So we could find that an agency could streamline and tweak things without any legislation needed. It could be legislation.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the November 8th, 2023 Economic Development and Housing Subcommittee. I'd like to introduce our attorney, Ellen Van Raper. Please explain the role of the public.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the committee. General comments that go beyond the scope of the agenda item must be made in the citizen comment session at the end of the agenda. The subcommittee and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending investigations, claims, or litigation. Additionally, any member of the public who appears before the subcommittee in their capacity as a lobbyist must, as required by Phoenix City Code, disclose this fact before addressing the subcommittee. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you very much. I would also like to introduce our interpreter, Elsie Duarte, who will provide a brief announcement.
Thank you. My name is Elsie Duarte, and I will be servicing as Spanish interpreter for today's Economic Development and Equity Subcommittee session. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días a la sesión de la Subcomisión de Desarrollo Económico y Equidad. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles hoy como intérprete a nuestra audiencia de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles de antemano, si es que va a dar un comentario público, por favor hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pause después de cada una o dos oraciones para poder interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you.
Elsie, thank you very much. Okay, we'll start the subcommittee meeting with a call to the public. Do we have any registered citizens for comment?
Mr. Chair, no comments at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 1 is approval of the EDH minutes from October 11th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we move to our consent agenda, items 2 through 3. Are there any questions for staff on these items? Okay. Items 2 through 3 are important items that allow the Library and Office of Arts and the Culture to do important work for our residents. The library is applying for grant funds to assist in the areas of workforce assistance and early literacy outreach, and the Office of Arts and Culture is awarding the contract to an artist to fabricate and install artwork for the North 32nd Street pedestrian corridor. Do I have a motion for items 2 through 3?
I'll move to approve, and I must say I'm very happy to see what's happening on North 32nd Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you very much. So items 4, 5, and 6 are for information only. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for staff on any of these items? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to item number 7. Item 7 is for information and discussion. Neighborhood Services Director Spencer Self is coming to the table with his staff to present. And I will turn it over to Mr. Self to introduce who is with him at the table, and we'll move on from there.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman and members of the subcommittee. Today, we are excited to bring you an update on the Gated Alley program since it was established as a full program just over a year ago. Included in this presentation will be highlighting the success through the sheer number of alleys gated so far, some of the challenges we faced, and process improvements we've made. Before that, we'll give a brief history of the program from the pilot until now. Joining me at the table, we have Deputy Director Yvette Roeder, Gated Alley Program Project Manager Stacy Butte, and her supervisor, Craig Gonzalez. I'll now turn the presentation over to Yvette.
Thank you, Spencer. Good morning, Chairman Robinson and members of the subcommittee. In September 2022, City Council approved the implementation of the Gated Alley program as a city function. And now, like Spencer said, a little more than a year into the program, we would like to provide you the progress we've made thus far. But first, let me give you a brief background. So before becoming a permanent program, the GAP started as a pilot in 2017 with 2 neighborhoods participating. Because of that success, the pilot was expanded to neighborhoods citywide using Block Watch grants as a funding source. Through the pilot, we successfully gated 78 alley segments, including 9 segments in residential areas near the Human Services campus. Participants of the pilot program are very satisfied and have expressed their appreciation, saying that they feel so much safer, more comfortable leaving home or being home alone. And the benefits are vast and far exceed the financial costs. You can't put a price on feeling comfortable in your own home, and these are the kinds of feedback that are very encouraging and satisfying to staff because of the immediate positive impact of what the program brings. Here you see a map of the city pinpointing the locations of the alley segments gated during the GAP pilot program. For fiscal year 2022-23, its first year as a permanent city function, we are excited to report that 124 alleys were approved for installation. Now, how were these gates funded? So as mentioned in the pilot phase, 78 alley segments were gated with the help of Block Watch funds, totaling about $498,000. In fiscal year 2022-23, thanks to council support of the program, $500,000 of the general funds was allocated for the program, which allowed us to gate about 45 alleys at a cost of $11,000 per standard alley segment. However, it is not clicking. It needs new batteries, I believe. Thank you. Thank you, Spencer. So again, in 22-23, thanks to council support, the $500,000 of the general funds was allocated for the program, which allowed us to gate about 45 alleys at a cost of $11,000 per standard alley segment. However, the demand for gates in its first year far exceeded the available funding. But thanks to the additional funding from Council District 5 office and one-time funding support from NSD, GAP was able to approve a total of 124 alley segments in fiscal year 2022-2023. Now, looking at the current fiscal year, 2023-24, and acknowledging the continuous flow of requests from residents, $352,000 from the general funds was added to the GAP budget, bringing the total budget for the program to $852,000. That increased funding gives the program the capacity to get approximately 77 alley segments. Next week, in collaboration with the police and street transportation departments, we will be requesting approval from council to use $750,000 in available Block Watch funds to gate more alleys as recommended by the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. This increased funding will allow the program to gate 68 more alleys, bringing the potential total of gated alleys for fiscal year 2023-2024 to 145 alley segments. Staff has received more than 80 requests and are continuously working with neighborhood liaisons and residents to review and move these requests along through the process. So after a year as a permanent program, we're happy to report that GAP is successfully fulfilling its goal to improve safety in neighborhoods by deterring criminal activities in alleys. But the program has its challenges, and we view challenges as opportunities for improvements. So one of our first challenges is acquiring property owners' consent. In trying to acquire consent from residents of properties adjacent to alleys near the Human Services campus, we quickly found out that most of the property owners lived out of state, or making it very difficult to connect with them to obtain their signatures of support. So to complete this step in the process, staff developed an opt-out process by sending certified letters to every property owner as a last resort, informing them of the city's intent to gate their alleys. A non-response to the certified letter was considered as no opposition to gating the alley adjacent to their property. Our second challenge was data collection and progress tracking. GAP's approval process has many steps that involves a handful of departments and tracks important data needed for reporting, for construction, and for budgeting. Staff has developed very comprehensive spreadsheets to track the progress of requests that are meticulously updated and reviewed, and it is a very time-intensive process to update several pages of spreadsheets, as you can imagine. Staff is exploring other technologies and applications that are intuitive, have the capability to automate the process, and can integrate other data sets for a holistic analysis of the program. Our third challenge is the maintenance. Staff has been encountering incidents of broken or damaged locks on some of the gates installed through the pilot phase. Now, these real-time service calls about damaged locks have been an ongoing issue and has become a huge undertaking for staff. To alleviate the situation, staff has experimented with the design of the locking mechanism, which has evolved from a daisy chain to a two-lock mechanism, and now to a three-lock mechanism: one lock for fire department, one lock for the utility company, and one for the resident. Additionally, staff has already replaced the previous lock to one made of boron carbide, not quite kryptonite, but boron carbide, a much stronger material that will be more difficult to cut or break. So looking ahead, staff is finalizing the draft for a maintenance plan that will include procedures for annual maintenance of the city's assets and for responding to real-time service calls. Finally, GAP requests are steadily increasing, and the method to process these requests is time-consuming and requires several actions before it reaches approval. Here to briefly explain the tasks that need to be completed before a GAP request is approved is the one dedicated project manager for the program, Stacy Butte.
Thank you, Yvette. Good morning, Chairman Robinson and members of the subcommittee. Like many resident-facing programs in the city, my work begins with a resident inquiry. From that initial touch to getting gates in the ground and their long-term maintenance, I coordinate and manage the workflow for the Gated Alley program. This includes guiding individuals through the request and petition process, entering their requests into our tracking spreadsheets, managing internal and external communications and approval processes with other city departments, coordinating and conducting site visits, coordinating permits, monitoring construction processes for each segment, conducting inspections, scheduling post-construction cleanup, managing the project's budget, and responding to real-time issues with gates and locks. I'm also very involved in the more programmatic aspects of the Gated Alley program, such as community outreach and engagement. What you see on the slide are just some high-level tasks that need to be completed on a daily basis, each of which involve their own series of processes and subtasks, often needing coordination with other departments. The process from request to approval is staff and task intensive, and GAP has given us the opportunity to interface with more than 200 applicants. Engaging with residents has been very satisfying, especially knowing GAP could improve safety and help residents feel more secure. Since its implementation, we've made some process improvements as the program continues to evolve, thanks to the support of our director and my supervisor, Greg Gonzalez, who's offered to assist with various aspects of the program requiring management insight or action. Greg is here with us today to explain more about his role in the Gated Alley program.
Chairman and members of the subcommittee, good morning. Stacy's done a great job in managing the daily tasks required by the program, but the continuous flow of requests have warranted the needs for staffing assistance to prevent any interruptions. For example, assistance with troubleshooting problems with existing infrastructure not conducive to gate installation requires additional meetings with contractors and residents. GAP provides options to be considered by both that allows for a gate to be constructed. For example, in the picture here, we're having a conversation with the resident trying to determine the best means to get the alley gated for him. So we provide, on site with the resident, we provide several options through the discussion, and the resident chose which path would work best for him in this scenario. Although it's easier to reject requests like this because of the lack of needed infrastructure, we believe in presenting all that is possible to demonstrate our due diligence. With the number of calls from concerned residents about damaged locks becoming more than what the project manager can handle on a daily basis, assistance with responding to these real-time service calls needs to be provided. The program's response to these types of calls consists of on-site visits to the gate location to replace the broken lock with new ones. Along with staff, we meet with utility contractors and residents regularly to discuss the importance of keeping alleys secure and train residents and utility companies on how the locking system works. The procurement of services that can lend a hand to the gated alley program can be lengthy and have unexpected circumstances that may require additional time from the project manager. We've worked with the finance department to procure the services of a welder to assist with the real-time service calls, and more recently, new contracts with gate and fencing vendors. Our new contract is on the agenda for formal council next week, and we hope to get renewed contracts shortly thereafter to avoid construction delays. Another one of the daily tasks is doing on-site visits to conduct visual audits, which is typically a one-person job. However, due to conditions at various locations, it is common for Stacy and I to pair up to visit an alley site to conduct visual audits. In addition to Stacy and I, we have been using the temporary project management assistant position created for the private property cleanup program pilot to support these visual audits to ensure that the team is able to employ the buddy system when needed. Our staffing challenges with the program has resulted in implementing some of the best practices in managing this city service. As demand from residents and support from council continue to grow, we, along with our vital city department partners, continue to collaborate to seek efficiencies and opportunities for improvements in addressing the needs of residents in a timely manner and delivering great customer service. It's worth noting that while I play a supporting role in the gated alley program, my main role is managing the neighborhood specialist program, directly supervising 10 neighborhood engagement staff whose main task is to connect residents to available city resources and programs. They too have been cross-trained to conduct GAP outreach, assist residents in completing their requests for gates, and answer resident questions about GAP. Needless to say, GAP is a much needed and very impactful community program that has grown quickly in just a little over a year and continues to grow. The GAP team, made up of one dedicated project manager and the support of a program manager, is very appreciative of any assistance provided by our friends at Public Works, Planning and Development, Police, Fire, Finance, and Law departments to ensure that the safety concerns of residents are met. I'll now hand it back to Spencer to conclude the presentation.
Thank you, Greg. And as Greg mentioned, we have been able to overcome the staffing challenges by leveraging other program staff, including Greg's time. This has been critical as we've been getting the program up and running and in order to accomplish the rate of installations we've been operating at. We're not asking for any additional resources today. This is an info-only item, but we did want to highlight that point as the temporary project management assistant position for the private property cleanup program is set to sunset at the end of this fiscal year. So we'll be bringing you an update on that program in early 2024. But today we just wanted to give you an update on the gated alley program and the success we've had so far, as well as some of those challenges we discussed. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. I think Woman Stark.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the hard work you guys have done. As you know, the Gated Alley project started in District 3 in Royal Palm and Sunny Slope. And a lot of it was due to loitering and littering problems. And so I'm glad to see people are very happy and feel it's successful. But one of the other benefits was moving the garbage collection from the alleys to the streets, which is more efficient. And I know originally we didn't really have data because we only had a few alleys to really understand what was going on. But now that we have a significant number of alleys closed, I'd be curious to hear from Public Works on any cost benefits that we're seeing from the program. And I know that isn't part of the presentation today, but I think it would be very helpful if they could share that with staff, because I think that is a benefit of closing these alleys. As we know, the city of Mesa closed all their alleys because of their public works and garbage collection. And they found that it was very successful financially to do that. So if we could get that information, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Okay. I'll make one brief comment. Stacy, Greg, Yvette, Spencer, I think Councilwoman Stark really hit it. The neighborhoods that have really embraced this are really appreciative of all your hard work. So it doesn't go unnoticed. Every time I've been in a neighborhood meeting up, especially in the Sunny Slope area, it comes up, it dominates a good portion of the community meetings, and the community is just very impressed with and happy with your efforts. So I wanted to, on behalf of them and behalf of this subcommittee, thank you as well. So great job. So thank you very much. Okay. So next we move to item number 8, and I'd like to invite Public Health Advisor Nicole Witt to the table.
My glasses. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee. We are pleased to join you this morning to provide an update on the first quarter of the naloxone program, its implementation, and next steps. I'm joined this morning by my colleagues Yanitza Soto, Special Projects Administrator, and Dominic Orso, Public Health Fellow with the Office of Public Health, who are responsible for managing the day-to-day operation of the city's naloxone program. In the spring, we presented to Council on our approach to opioid response planning and identified a number of actions to be taken immediately while we complete our overall community assessment in partnership with Maricopa County Department of Public Health. This included the intent to explore the feasibility of expanding the city's naloxone program beyond police, fire, and municipal security to other departments and staff within the city whose work brings them into contact with people who use drugs, their friends, or their family. We have different slides, so I'm just going to jump around. To provide a recap of the importance of the overdose prevention for the city of Phoenix, based on preliminary data from the Office of the Medical Examiner, 991 people in Phoenix lost their lives due to overdose in 2022. City of Phoenix accounts for more than half of all overdoses in Maricopa County. The majority of these deaths involved opioids. Overdoses, as you can see, impact all neighborhoods and all types of households. As part of the opioid response planning, Maricopa County Department of Public Health has led several assessments this year, including a service provider survey, a survey and interviews with people who use drugs. And there are several overarching recommendations coming from these assessments, including ensuring easy access to naloxone in high overdose areas and focusing on the cross-section between heat and overdose. In Phoenix, in Maricopa County, we know that 67% of heat-related deaths in 2022 involved some sort of substance use, majority of those drug use. And of the 991 fatal overdoses in Phoenix in 2022, 40% of those occurred during the months of June, July, and August. Through this survey with people who use drugs, we know that libraries and other public places were identified as important locations for naloxone distribution and resources. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Yanitza Soto.
of this year, the Office of Public Health met with city departments regarding the naloxone program. We also launched a citywide staff survey to assess knowledge, attitudes, awareness, and training needs of staff related to working with people who use substances. Staff overwhelmingly supported the need for overdose prevention and naloxone as important training priorities for the city. On July 17, 2023, the City Administrative Regulation 1.99 was established for the naloxone program. The AR was published for all city staff, which enabled the expansion of naloxone and identifies training requirements. The AR 1.99 covers 3 types of distribution, the first being administration. Under this program type, employees can volunteer to carry and administer naloxone to someone experiencing an overdose. Second is take-home. Departments make naloxone kits available to people who may experience or witness an opioid overdose. And third is leave behind, which is specific to EMS, as state law permits EMS agencies to leave naloxone with a person, family member, or friend of a loved one who may experience an opioid overdose. This program type is not yet launched in Phoenix. There are several goals of the naloxone program, including increasing awareness of signs and symptoms of overdose among employees in the community, increasing access to free naloxone in the community, improving confidence of staff and residents to respond to overdose, reducing stigma of substance use, and ultimately the overall goal of reducing fatal overdoses in Phoenix. Partnership with who needs naloxone? We know that people who use drugs are the most in need to access this life-saving medication. And we also know that people, including friends and family members of people who use substances and people whose jobs bring them in close contact, are also important to have naloxone accessible to them. In partnership with Human Resources, Phoenix Fire, Phoenix TV, and Phoenix U, the Communications Office, the Office of Public Health developed an online training for opioid overdose and the naloxone administration. This training video was produced with Phoenix Fire and also promoted for residents as well. To date, we've trained over 2,448 employees and non-employee volunteers who have completed this training. Our team also presented at team and department meetings to ensure comfort and understanding of the program and answered questions. And I'll hand it over now to Dominic, our public health fellow, to continue with the presentation.
Chair, members of the subcommittee, naloxone kit assembly takes place in City Hall, where our office collaborates with Volunteer Phoenix to organize regular volunteer opportunities, commonly referred to as our kit-making days. These dedicated volunteers assemble each kit, which includes 2 doses of Narcan, a CPR face shield, gloves, and instructional pamphlets. These kits are then prepared for distribution to various departments. During the first quarter, we've seen remarkable engagement with 17 volunteers contributing 43.5 hours of their time, resulting in the assembly of over 2,000 of these kits. The official launch of our program occurred on August 14th at the Burton Bar Library with Mayor Guy. Oh, skip ahead. There we go. Thank you. Sorry. The official launch of our program occurred on August 14th at the Burton Bar Library with Mayor Gallego and Vice Mayor Ansari leading the announcement of the program's citywide implementation across all of the 17 public library sites. Residents now have the convenience of accessing naloxone at any library location without the need for identification or to discuss with any library staff. During the program's initial quarter, spanning July through September, a total of 2,073 naloxone kits were distributed through city programs, with the majority being distributed through our libraries. Furthermore, it's important to know that during that same time period, the fire department administered naloxone to 1,792 patients, and PD administered Narcan to 40. Our naloxone program is being implemented in a phased approach. During quarter 1, we onboarded libraries, housing, the HEAT office, neighborhood services, the Office of Homeless Solutions, aviation, and HR. In quarter 2, we plan on onboarding the CAP program, Parks and Recreation, and additional programs within the Human Services Department. Overall, the response to our program has been overwhelmingly positive, both residents and staff expressing their appreciation. Here are some of the comments we've received. Residents and staff have conveyed the gratitude for the program's impact on the community. And now I'll pass it over to Nicole.
Over the next quarter, we'll support implementation of additional programs as Dominic identified. We are working closely with Maricopa County Department of Public Health and the Arizona Department of Health Services to determine this ongoing support for the program in Phoenix, as well as how best to address the demand and ensure critical programs like the Community Assistance Program and our Office of Homeless Solutions continue to operate and have a consistent supply of naloxone. We're working with Parks, Library, and Housing, as well as the Office of Homeless Solutions to support education related to substance use for clients and residents that they are serving. It's anticipated that there will be additional costs for the program in this year. So initially, all of our orders of Narcan were through the Arizona Department of Health Services naloxone program. Given the demand and some of the gaps we've seen since we've implemented this program, we know that there will be a need to purchase additional naloxone through the city as well, and we would do that through our settlement funds. And as noted, we'll continue to support training and bring back updates as this program evolves over the next few months. And thank you for your time today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Ms. Mayor.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much for the presentation. First of all, I just want to thank you all so much. I have heard nothing but positive feedback about this program from residents, from city staff, and I really, really believe in it, and I think it's doing life-saving work. So I want to really thank you for the effort that you've put in. Mostly a couple of technical questions. Can you talk a little bit more about just like the rollout of the program? I know we launched it back in August, but I recall hearing that we ran out pretty quickly of everything. And can you just talk a little bit more about how that went?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Vice Mayor Anasari, thank you for the question. So we are in the beginning stages of rolling it out. We use the best evidence and data and experiences from other communities and cities on the different sites that are implementing, like our libraries, on what we thought was the amount needed on a regular basis. While there are libraries across the nation that are doing this, there's not an abundance of them. So we knew we would need to take this time to determine, and we'll need probably to take this whole year to determine what is an actual baseline and what is a consistent amount to keep supply within all the various sites, which is why we've decided to do a phased approach, so to get some of our more critical programs going and then slowly add programs and services over the course of the year. You're right, we did launch and it was a great success. It did identify some gaps across Phoenix as it relates to access for naloxone, gaps that we knew existed but maybe didn't realize how large those gaps were. And so our libraries do run out. We do restock all the programs that are on board right now, including our libraries. We restock them every month, but it is a limited supply based on what we can receive on a regular basis from the Arizona Department of Health Services, which is why we've been in close conversation with them, as well as Access, which is actually where Arizona Department of Health Services gets majority of their naloxone supply, as well as the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, to determine what can a consistent supply for Phoenix look like. But we do restock our libraries every month. They do continue to run out quickly, which just, again, reinforces the need for this program. There isn't one library in any district that doesn't run out. And so then we do try to work with them to provide them more kits if we can, and then definitely on a regular monthly basis, we're continuing to restock. Our hope is that we wouldn't run out and that we would have a consistent supply. That way, anybody who does go in the library looking for a kit will be able to get it at the time that they're there.
So I noticed in the presentation you have the breakdown of the fatal overdoses in 2022. The highest number was in District 7, but I think what's important to note is that every district had a pretty significant number of the overdoses, and you just mentioned that every library seems to be running out. So is that what you're seeing, that it doesn't matter what district you're in, there's the demand is it relatively equal?
We are giving, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Vice Mayor Anasari. We are giving a limited supply, so it is hard to tell the variation between libraries, but yes, every library that's providing to the public is running out, and they're running out pretty quickly. We are trying, we do work with our library partners. We know libraries that are maybe in higher areas where we have a higher number of overdoses. And so if we are able to supply them more mid-month, we're trying to work with them to prioritize the libraries that they might send those additional kits to versus those that may have a lower rate of overdose. Unfortunately, majority of, as you could see on the chart we provided in the beginning, it really is every library, and it really is every area that is critical to this response, and they are all strategically located in areas that, compared to the state and the rest of the county, have a significant rate of fatal overdose and non-fatal overdose.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of your costs, you said $300,000 for 2023 to 2024. Do you anticipate that with the settlement funds that we have, we'll be able to continue funding a program like this, or are we at any point going to need to look for additional pools of money? And I'm asking that not like I absolutely think this needs to continue to be a priority, so I want to make sure we're looking at all avenues, whether it's for this type of work or even I think we should start. I'm sure you're thinking about maybe getting into the prevention space moving forward as well. So just wondering about that.
So thank you for the additional question through you, Mr. Chair, to Vice Mayor Ansari. Yes, we will need additional dollars. We can see that already to continue to support this program, and probably at the volume, unfortunately, that it needs to be maintained. We are talking to Maricopa County Department of Public Health as well as the state. So as you know, the Attorney General's office has majority of the settlement dollars in the state, so a little over half of all the settlement dollars are actually still with the Attorney General's office. And there's maybe an opportunity there, we recognize, to support naloxone distribution across the state, and in particular in Phoenix, where we know we have some of the highest numbers of overdoses. We are looking at grant opportunities as they come up as well, and our office will certainly apply for any grant for naloxone to continue to support this program. And as you noted, and I've mentioned before, we don't have an exact number of settlement dollars that the city of Phoenix is getting, but it's maybe roughly $3 million a year, which is not a lot. And we know there are many other priorities that are coming out of the assessments that we hope to bring to you as council. And so we could easily spend all of that money on naloxone alone. And so we are really working on what is an appropriate budget for the program. The $300,000 that we put forward really is based on if we were to purchase enough naloxone that would sustain just like our community assistance program, for example, and that's based on the non-fatal overdose responses that our fire department goes on a yearly basis, so that's where that number comes from. And then we continue to work with ADHS and our other partners to supply the other programs and services that we have through this program. We know the need is large. We know when we launched the program, we had healthcare providers and other agencies across Phoenix also reaching out to us looking for accessibility for naloxone. And we're sharing that information as we receive it back with our state partners so that they can incorporate that into their planning processes.
Got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman.
Councilwoman Hodge Washington, I think you have some questions. They were answered. Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the information. And as a prior public safety officer who is out there seeing these things with regularity, I will tell you clearly these efforts are saving lives. You know that. And I think it is a good thing. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 9 is an update on the homeless data in partnership with the Maricopa County Association of Governments. And I believe I'd like to introduce Gina Montez, Deputy City Manager Gina Montez, and Director of Homeless Solutions Rachel Milne, and Katie Gentry, MAG's Regional Homeless Program Manager.
Good morning, Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee. While they get ready to present, this is one of what I believe will be multiple discussions that the subcommittee and the council will be having regarding homelessness and data and where we go in the future, kind of what we're facing, and in recognition that it is a regional situation, it's a regional problem, and we work in conjunction with the Maricopa Association of Governments. So we really appreciate Katie Gentry coming and presenting, along with Rachel Milne, the Director of Office of Homeless Solutions. And so I'll turn the presentation over and we'll proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Robinson and members of the subcommittee. We're pleased to be here today to provide you with an overview of the current homelessness crisis and housing data, including regional data from the Maricopa Association of Governments. Presenting with me today is Katie Gentry, our regional homeless program manager with MAG. The Maricopa region is one of the fastest growing regions in the nation. With that growth has come decreasing availability, increasing rent and mortgages, higher evictions, and as a result, increasing homelessness. The presentation will include trends in housing over the past decade, data on homelessness, and how the region and the city are responding to this increasing need. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, Chairman Robinson and the committee for having me here today. I want to give a brief overview as to what MAG is, at least my team within MAG. We are kind of a hub for coordination and planning of homeless services across the region, bringing together the 27 cities and towns, 3 tribal nations, and 2 counties within Maricopa and adjacent areas. We staff what's called the Continuum of Care, which is a group that's community-wide commitment to bring together individuals to address homelessness. And we have over 100 different partners from across 65 different organizations represented within that Continuum of Care. It's a board followed by 9 lateral committees, as well as a series of work groups really working to address homelessness. In that, we also oversee coordinated entry, which is kind of the front door as you think about coming into homelessness. Really thinking about how do we get folks in the front door and then connected to the right services, evaluated for those right services, and connected as those resources are available. We also oversee the point in time count that happens every January. We will be kicking that off next week with all of our city partners, which happens the last 10 days of January and will be coming up rather quickly. And then finally, we oversee the Homeless Management Information System, which is our data warehouse, really identifying all the different partners who are serving individuals experiencing homelessness and making sure that those service partners are connecting based on the clients they're serving. So I wanted to spend a couple minutes here looking back and really at the housing that has come on over the last, since 2000 all the way to now. On your screen, you'll see residential completions since 2000. From 2000 to 2010, we were building at a much faster rate than we have in the past decade. The number of residential completions were almost double what happened from 2011 to 2022. And if we narrow that even further to apartment completions as part of those residential completions across the region, we've seen more increase in apartment completions in the last decade, but still not near enough comparatively to the growth that we've seen across the region, specifically since 2017. That's really led to our vacancy rate that we see across the region now. Over time, we've continued to see that decline, specifically in the blue bar, with the latest rate being less than 5%. So a healthy market is really between 5 and 10%, which is allowing for moves, people coming into the region who can find a place to live that really makes sense for them. And when we are at 5% or even below 5% as initial projections look like into 2023, we don't have enough for that moving between apartments, and therefore people are paying at a much higher rate in their rents. So we also see that come through. The green and dark blue represents the number of rents below $1,000 across the region. On the far left in 2010, 93% of rents were below $1,000, and now on the far right in 2022, less than 7% of rents are below $1,000. So when previously we've been described as a really affordable place to live, that is no longer the case because rents have increased so dramatically. On the far left side, you see none of that light blue at the very top, and yet in 2022, we're seeing that be more than 10% of our market in rents. If I narrow into Phoenix specifically, in 2010, that green and dark blue was 98% of rents below $1,000, and now it's just 5% are below $1,000 on that far right side in 2022. I also want to highlight this map. It shows rents across the region. So, this is the change in rents. Specifically, I want to call out that dark red dots that are happening across the region. Those are places where rents have increased more than 100%. So if an apartment used to cost $800, now it costs $1,600 to live there. I really want to highlight this map mostly from the standpoint of rents are changing everywhere. It is not just anecdotally that we hear that my rent went up $500. That is the actual data that we are seeing across the entire region. So that is leading to many households being cost burdened. We often tell individuals that they should not spend more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities or their housing costs. And yet 548,000 households across Maricopa County are spending more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. 256,000 households are spending more than 50% of their income on rent and utilities, which means that that is not sustainable, and those are individuals that are more likely to experience an eviction and eventually potentially experience homelessness. So I want to briefly touch on evictions. We're continuing to see evictions increase across the region. In the gray is prior to COVID, where we saw evictions continuously rising, and then we saw a drop off when COVID hit because of the eviction moratorium. But when that expired, we continued to see evictions increase since, and 2023 preliminary numbers show even higher eviction numbers, with the latest month being just below 8,000, which is the highest evictions we've seen even since before the recession in 2008. As I narrow in to Phoenix, you see similar trends happening here in Phoenix with those kind of increasing numbers even prior to COVID on that far right side. Once again, you'll see evictions are happening across the region. There's not one specific place that evictions are happening, but they are happening more often in lower income areas. So they are places where individuals do not have another place they can move. These are already lower income rent units, and yet evictions are happening because they cannot afford those locations and they cannot afford another place to move to. Even though the pink dots are in lower income areas, you also see kind of underlying evictions are happening in every single neighborhood. There is not a single neighborhood that does not have evictions occurring. So now that I've set the scene, I want to narrow back into homelessness data and really talk about the work that is happening locally on homelessness. One data point that we often use is the point in time count data. In 2023, 49% of our individuals were sheltered and 51% were sheltered. The sheltered count has increased 46% over the last 4 years, and the unsheltered numbers have continued to increase by 54%. This is the first year that we saw a slight dip in the unsheltered count, but the majority of that is because the number of shelters that we have stood up over the last 2 years in partnerships with jurisdictions, specifically in Phoenix, but across the region. So even though we saw that slight dip, our numbers continue to increase because of that sharp increase in sheltered numbers, jumping 18% over the previous year. I want to highlight just briefly the point in time count in 2019. This is a map of unsheltered interactions across the region that happened during the point in time count. And in contrast, compared to 2023, you see much more dots there because of the amount of people encountered during the point in time count, and we're continuing to see that rise in unsheltered. But we know homelessness is happening across the region. We use another data source, the Homeless Management Information System, and this is mapping all of the different outreach contacts that we've had in the region. Every single dot is a time that we've interacted with somebody experiencing homelessness through our outreach teams and our partners who are interacting in the Homeless Management Information System. And we use that data to create what we call the Homelessness Trends Report. It's a quarterly report that shows trends in homelessness data. It is a much more accurate report because it is happening throughout the course of the year. We use that data within that system to create this report. It's available on our website, but it really tracks not just the date within the last 10 days of January, but throughout the year, the information that is happening. And so we often turn to this report. It's available on our website. And so our last report was created in June of this year. Throughout that month, over 8,000 people were encountered within that month, 6,349 households, and that is an increase of 34% since June of 2021, just 2 years prior. So we know we're continuing to see that increase of people experiencing homelessness. I want to dive into that a little bit further, and I'm sure many of you have heard this data point before. We have 19 people coming into homelessness for every 10 people finding housing, so we're continuing to see this increase because we have so many more people coming in than moving out of our system. On average, that's 970 new households coming in each month, so that is continuing to increase over time. And this last data point is something that I think is really critical to know. We have over 28,600 people that were served in the last fiscal year. So at any point, it's 8,400 people, but there's a consistent churn through the system of people coming in, and we're giving them services, and we're trying to get them back into housing, which is a more sustainable solution and the best place for an individual. I think it's important to know, because I think people often say, like, this system is only 10,000 people because they're using a point-in-time count number, or they're using the homelessness trends report number, but it's so much broader than that because people are coming in and out of our system consistently. I also want to briefly touch on the demographic comparison. This compares HMIS data comparatively to census data. We see more males experiencing homelessness than comparatively to census data. We see more people of color, specifically Black and Native American, overrepresented in our homeless response system. And we slightly less Hispanic or Latina people within our homeless response system. So what are we doing about it? 2 years ago, we came together as a region to create Pathways Home, a regional action plan for local and tribal governments with 3 steps and 14 sub-steps. These 3 steps are to commit to work regionally, increasing safe housing options, and supporting diverse partnerships. I won't go into all the 14 sub-steps, but it's available on our website if individuals are interested. I want to quickly highlight, though, some of the progress that we've made since then. We've increased funding to address homelessness across the region. Part of that is American Rescue Plan dollars that were really critical to responding to the need of COVID, but we've also continued to identify the need that every city needs to be doing more to address homelessness across the region. We've added over 1,400 permanent housing beds and 1,700 temporary housing units, inclusive of Phoenix, across the region. We've developed 5 different toolkits, everything from how to create a community court to how to get employers interested in hiring people who are previously experiencing homelessness. We've done evaluations of both of those 2 systems I mentioned at the beginning, the coordinated entry system and the homeless management information system, to identify how can we improve those systems and continue to make actionable steps towards those, which have now gone into the implementation phase. And finally, continuing to increase connections with partners. We know we cannot do this alone. The homeless response system really relies on all of those other systems of care to be able to be successful. Through this process, we've also created a tool called the Homeless Assets and Needs Data for Unified Planning, or HANDUP. It helps map resources across the region, and here identifies all of the different shelter resources that are available across the region. This next slide really identifies that there is housing resources in yellow as well as shelter in red, knowing that we need resources across the region to be able to address the immense need that we have. So with that, I will turn it back over to Rachel Milne to talk specifically about shelter here in Phoenix.
Thank you, Katie. So yes, as we sort of zoom in even closer on Katie's maps, the next 2 maps are City of Phoenix specific with the districts overlaid. And this first one has all of the City of Phoenix funded shelters and where they are in our council districts. We fund shelters in districts 3, 4, 7, and 8. And the next map shows additional resources, homeless service resources and shelters, not necessarily just funded by the City of Phoenix. And here we see shelters in all districts except for 1 and 2. Moving forward, the Office of Homeless Solutions is going to continue to work with Katie and MAG on all of our data needs. Specifically, the items we are currently working on include our Human Services Campus engagement and placement data, finding out where all the 590 individuals that we helped place into an indoor location, where are they now? We're going to make improvements to the Office of Homeless Solutions dashboard in the future as well. And then also we've been requested to really do a deep dive into our provider data, our outcome data. So looking not only at the region's provider data, but how our City of Phoenix funded provider data compares. And that is it for us. We will answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions, so I'll come to my colleagues. And I think I know the answer to the question, but can you explain why does all the regional homeless information, all the data and everything, why does it go through MAG?
Thank you, Chairman Robinson, for the question. Let me start there. MAG is tasked with being the continuum of care on behalf of the region. So that is a federally funded program that comes in locally as the collaborative applicant to the continuum of care. We work to bring all of those different partners together. So that is how coordinated entry exists. That's how the homeless management information system exists. And so that is, as the collaborative applicant, we continue to kind of oversee and partner with all of those different communities as a regional approach. So we are tasked both from a federal perspective, but also from a local perspective to being that partner.
Okay. So and then how do the cities go about getting that data?
We work in partnership with the cities both through our local jurisdiction committee, which is a committee as part of the continuum of care structure, identifying what data are all cities looking for. And then we work with our data committee who oversees our homeless management information system to approve data requests to release to jurisdictions. Jurisdictions often have data in aggregate form, but because this is dealing with client level information, we want to make sure that the individual client is represented in those choices, and we're using it for care coordination when we do release that data.
Thank you, Katie. And Rachel, this real last question, I think it's for you. You know, how is MAG supporting what Phoenix is experiencing down on the campus?
Sure, Chairman Robinson. The City of Phoenix, we have now a data specialist on our team in the Office of Homeless Solutions. We actually hired him from the Solari, who is the contracted provider for the Homeless Management Information System. So he's able to pull a lot of our city-specific data, anything that we fund. But when we do need to go to MAG to get more regional data or provider data that we don't have access to because we don't directly fund that, we go either through the local jurisdiction committee, as Katie described, but more often than not, if it's something specific that just the City of Phoenix is requesting, not that all the other cities in the community are requesting, we work with Katie to get on a data subcommittee agenda to see if that request could be approved.
Okay, thank you. Any of my colleagues have any questions? Councilwoman Hodge Washington.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Katie, for the updates on the housing and homelessness crisis in our region. I'm very encouraged to see that we are making progress in addressing these issues. However, I think there's still work to be done. I don't want to be the negative Nelly of the group, but I would be remiss if I did not note that 50% of the city-funded shelters are in my district, 25% of the overall homeless and shelters are actually in my district as well. So I want to talk a little bit, I want to ask some questions about what is in the works to ensure that this is actually being spread throughout the entire region.
Sure. Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, one of the items in the City of Phoenix strategies to address homelessness plan is to have diverse options, to diversify our shelter options. And certainly the maps that I showed you today include some of the temporary options that we've included, but the more permanent options, we are working to diversify where those options are within the City of Phoenix. Certainly we've got some, and I can provide you a list of all of our 790 beds that are coming online in the districts that those include as well. And then I'll let Katie answer for regionally.
Thank you, Chairman Robinson, Councilmember Hodge Washington. Part of Pathways Home is asking for every jurisdiction to come to the table and say, what can you do to support? And so as part of that, it has been kind of identified that we need more regional solutions. We've had shelters open in the last year in the West Valley and in the East Valley, and we're continuing to work with those different jurisdictions to say what can we do to offer more and what financial support is needed versus what land support, kind of all the challenges that you address here in identifying where shelters can be located and good neighbor agreements and making sure that we're meeting the neighborhood but also meeting the individuals experiencing homelessness where they are to be able to get services where they are in their neighborhood. And so really working to identify what are those locations. We've, as I mentioned, we've opened 1,700 shelter beds, definitely tons in Phoenix, but also across the region, and we've seen more across the region open than ever before. Part of our work is within the local jurisdiction committee to say, what are those barriers? How do we overcome those barriers? Rachel and her team have been amazing in helping other cities identify how to overcome some of the challenges, and how can we better work together to say, what does that look like for them? And then secondarily, working in management committee and regional council as part of MAG to say, how is everybody else stepping up to the table too?
The follow-up question to one of your comments, you said of the 1,700 beds that have been opened, how many of them are outside of Phoenix, the city of Phoenix?
I knew this question was going to get asked, and I should have had better notes for it. I believe close to 400, but I will double check and get back to you.
Also had a follow-up question. We saw a lot of data regarding the housing, apartment rents, and just the reduction in overall housing in our city, in our region. And I wanted to know what exactly is in the pipeline to help address those, because I know we spent a lot of, I've seen we spent the regional and citywide, we have focused a lot on the homeless component of it. And I think we need to get people from not being homeless by providing additional resources. So I want to hear a little bit more about what's in the pipeline for to address the housing portion of this crisis.
Regionally, part of that step is we know we need to address the temporary and short term, but build out to the long term too. And so increasing safe housing options isn't just that short, it's the long term, identifying zoning challenges, identifying what funding sources can be used for housing. So really working in partnership with the Department of Housing on the low-income housing tax credit, both at the state tax credit and the federal tax credit, understanding from a homeless services perspective, what are the needs to be able to integrate those sources and really identify how can individuals experiencing homelessness or low income move into those low income housing tax credits. I think a huge championship of the last legislator is the $230 million that went into the Housing Trust Fund and the Housing Services Fund. And with that, we're starting, those notice of funding opportunities have been rolled out in the last week or so to really identify how can we get those to start building the pipeline for more housing to be built. I know I will turn it over to Rachel to talk more about a Phoenix specific plan as well.
Sure. Chairman Robinson, Councilwoman Hodge-Washington, we certainly in the Office of Homeless Solutions have been very focused, as you know, on the emergency crisis and the shelter beds. But now as we're coming to a place where we feel like we've sort of righted the system with our 790 permanent shelter beds in the works, we're getting to a point where we can focus on those two aspects that are really going to help us move the system, prevention and affordable housing. I'm happy to say we're making good headway on our the Office of Homeless Solutions first supportive housing project, the 125 units that we'll be opening in District 5. And then also we're, of course, coordinating with Titus and the Housing Department on the Housing Phoenix Plan, and Gina can certainly speak better to that than I.
Follow-up question. We talked about identifying, you talked about a lot of components of this plan. So I presume it's a written plan with scheduled time frame, and are we on the time frame? Are we on track?
For Pathways Home, which is the regional action plan, we are on track. We identified increasing housing options by 25%. Those housing options are specifically for people experiencing homelessness, so rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. We increased emergency housing vouchers through the federal government when those were available, but those are vouchers for rental in the general market, not necessarily building new housing. And we had not identified within Pathways Home building new housing, and that would go back to kind of the Phoenix's specific plan.
I just want to, before I close, Chair, thank you. I just want to again just echo the sentiment that I really think it needs to be a regional approach. It is not fair to burden one community or one district with the needs of something that we see as we acknowledge as a regional crisis, and we need to do what we can to exercise and incentivize others to take on their fair share. We have to think of the people that are affected by this. It's not just necessarily for me considering the aesthetics of my community. It's about the individuals that are impacted. I had the benefit of, Rachel and Gina both know this, I had the benefit of attending the first enhancement at the zone as well as the last enhancement at the zone. And these are real individuals, and these are individuals that need our help and need our assistance. Many individuals, as you've seen with the data, are simply because of being outpriced in their residence, and they're no longer able to do that. So this needs to be prioritized, and not just continue to have a plan. We need to execute and make sure we implement and make this a priority moving forward. So I say all that to say, although Gina and Rachel can tell you, Katie, that I am I'm a staunch supporter of the work that you guys do, and I just really want to be a strong ally, but I need to also ensure that it's moving forward in a manner that is giving it the urgency in which it demands. So thank you again for your time, thank you for the updates, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much for the presentation. This was you went through it very quickly, but the amount of data is obviously very dense. So a couple of follow-up and clarification questions. Obviously, since Phoenix offers the majority of the services in the Valley, the data shows that the majority of those experiencing homelessness are in Phoenix. I was wondering if we have data on these individuals' last permanent residence, and is there a percentage by city on where individuals have fallen into homelessness?
Yeah, one of the data points that we ask during when individuals are engaging within the homeless response system through HMIS is city of last permanent address as well as zip code of last permanent address. So we ask them and that permanent address should be 90 days or more. So really not just I stayed there last night, it really should be where were you staying for a consistent amount of time. I'm happy to work with Rachel and her team to get data broken down by city for you all. That is not data that I have in the back of my head that I can just provide.
Okay, sure. That would be great if you could do that as a follow-up. And then another piece of the presentation was on the amount of residents and specifically apartments that were built. Do we have numbers on the breakdown of affordable units within those, or is it just categorized broadly by apartments?
Those are the data that I showed today is just broadly apartment completions. One of the challenges with breaking down data by area median income or things like that is the discrepancies in data and consistency of data. And so right now we get apartment completions. We have been doing quite a bit of work across our analytics division to really identify what is the amount of affordable units that are needed and affordable for who. So really identifying versus area median income or individual and size of family. So you have a lot more different data components that are coming in, and my analytics director could come and give you just a 30-minute presentation on that. So definitely can bring some more data for you if you're interested in diving further into that breakdown of apartment completions.
Is that something you had mentioned at the outset, that there's going to be multiple iterations of this? Is that something that you could come back with at the next presentation?
Chairman Vice Mayor, one of the future presentations on the Housing Phoenix plan specifically, and where we do a quarterly update, and it does have, like, for Phoenix specifically, how many, approximately what portion of the new units in Phoenix are affordable, and so we'll have some of that information that we can provide. And certainly we can include the regional data as well when we update the subcommittee on the Housing Phoenix plan and kind of where we are in terms of affordability. And I think we are looking to, in the spring, come back and do as early as possible, do an update on the plan and where we are with that data. So the next quarterly report is coming out. It's either out or it's going to be out very soon in the next week or so, and so we'll have
I would
more
be
data.
specifically interested in how Phoenix compares to the other cities that are part of MAG in terms of the number of affordable units built, because I do think that, to the Councilwoman's point about regionalization, we should be I'd like to have a better understanding of who's really stepping up to build affordable housing in the Valley and who's not. Great. And then my next question, this one might be even trickier, but was wondering if we have any data on the industries that people maybe have worked in before or during falling into homelessness, and whether or not we have any understanding of the wages that they were getting paid.
Fortunately, no, is the short answer. I think oftentimes that's data, we are collecting data on whether or not they're employed or not employed, but not necessarily the details of their employment. We know that we still have on average, 40% of our individuals experiencing homelessness are working some job. And so really understanding a lot of those folks are still employed and trying to stay employed while also overcoming the challenges of experiencing homelessness. Can definitely look into what does that look like to collect in the future, but that's not data we collect currently within the Homeless Management Information System.
That would be very helpful, I think, if you could look into it. I feel like as we have this conversation, you know, there's a somewhat of an elephant in the room about Band-Aids to address rising homelessness versus addressing root causes. And in my view, it seems that wages remaining stagnant or not keeping up with cost of living, not only in Phoenix but around the country, is something that you know, probably has an impact on rising homelessness levels. So it would be helpful to understand, you know, what salaries people are making when this might happen to them. I mean, I'm sure we can get a sense of it by breaking down the percentage that they're paying for their rent, percentage of their income. But if that's something that we could look into, I think it would be helpful as we work to look at, you know, what industries and what professions possibly need to look at raising their salaries to keep up with cost of living.
The industries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a good idea.
I know it's something we can look at from a census data perspective, looking at who is cost burden, as you mentioned, and then who is kind of falling in. We're looking at really trying to identify who is going through the eviction system and then coming into the homelessness system. And so we know that there is not a direct correlation, not a direct causation, but there is a correlation of folks who are moving through the eviction system and then entering homelessness. And so we can start to identify what are some of these industries, how much money are they making based off of census data, and then correlate.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We need data.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think all the questions that were posed to you and the request, it would be valuable for us to know. So with that, thank you very much for your presentation and really appreciate all your hard work. Okay. Item number 10 is the Downtown Phoenix Economic Impact Study. We have another panel of presenters making their way to the table. Chris Mackey, the Community and Economic Development Director, Devney Marley, President and CEO of Downtown Phoenix, and Jim Rounds, President of Rounds Consulting Group. So welcome.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the subcommittee. We are here today to provide you an overview of a recently completed economic impact study on downtown. When we think about, Chairman, you and I have both been here a very long time, as how Deputy City Manager Chan has been here a long time as well. And we think about downtown and where it used to be in the 90s and the early 2000s. In fact, we did not reach the population that we had in 1970 until 2016. And that really was through the vision of the mayor and council and our partnerships with Downtown Phoenix, Inc. and all of the downtown community to turn this back into this vibrant, amazing place where people want to grow and live and thrive. I'm joined today by Devney Marley, President and CEO of Downtown Phoenix, Inc., and Jim Rounds, President of Rounds Consulting. Rounds Consulting completed the economic impact study that we'll talk about today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Marley, who will take us through a presentation before she turns it over to Mr. Rounds.
Thank you, Chris. Well, good morning, Chairman and members of the subcommittee. Before jumping into the study itself, I wanted to mention that we did conduct a similar study in 2018 and felt it was important to work with Jim Rounds and his firm again for consistency purposes and to be able to provide comparisons when sharing the data. You'll see some of those comparisons later in the presentation. In terms of how we define, let's see. In terms of how we define downtown in the study, we all know that downtown has grown and evolved over the years, and we think of it more than just the Enhanced Municipal Services District or the core of downtown. And we instead, for 2022, measured our DPI service area, which includes McDowell on the north, 7th Street to 7th Avenue, and to the Union Pacific Railroad tracks on the south, which are again just south of Footprint Center. Downtown Phoenix Inc., or DPI, is the community building organization for downtown and also the administrative umbrella for many of the community and economic development organizations that focus on downtown Phoenix. This umbrella structure has proven very successful since 2013 when it was created, and wouldn't be possible without our investors, which include most of the largest employers in downtown, the City of Phoenix, of course, being one of those, and the other 11 are represented on screen here today. I'm very pleased to share that the study recognizes the value of these public-private partnerships and investments in downtown and confirms an incredible return on investment to all of our property owners year after year in downtown Phoenix. It also confirms the importance of collaboration amongst our stakeholders and how critical that collaboration has been to our continued growth, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic. I'll now turn it over to Jim Rounds to walk you through the winning formula that he discovered through his research and to share the key findings of the impact study.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, let me just start by saying that we have a long history of looking at downtown development, looking at Phoenix as a whole. In fact, we have a long history of working with Chris. Many times in the past, we've talked about housing projects and other economic development projects, whether or not they might be a subject for a potential lawsuit. And we'd have a meeting with Chris, and by the time I was done, I was completely satisfied. So we have a long history of talking about what it takes to build a community, and I think it's fascinating that this isn't just an economic development community, but you were talking a lot about housing. And what you establish in downtown, even though we're focusing on the downtown numbers, the ability to get this momentum going, this more integrated community, allows you to work on things like efficient housing. We have a lot of data, as you heard from our friends at MAG and some others, and there's efforts going on right now to try to coordinate some of that data among different groups, including ourselves, and come up with some policy solutions that can be implemented at the state level and local level. And that's the same thing that happens when you deal with economic development. You can't have one large community carry the water for everybody. You have to have support from others. And so all of the housing discussion that happened I thought was fascinating, and maybe we can come back and present specifically on that at some point. But in terms of downtown, hub for economic activity and innovation, I love the fact that we're talking about higher wage businesses. One of our complaints, after the Great Recession, we worked very hard with a lot of people, and we authored the report, the jobs recovery report for the state, that set some of the tax rates at an appropriate level, looked at some regulatory reform, and created some of the new economic development programs. And that really helped a lot, but we were still focused on growing just jobs in terms of volume. Then we started growing in terms of quality. You need the quality to generate the revenue so you can create the programs to help those that need a little bit of help to move forward. And that's what we're seeing in Phoenix. We're seeing that movement towards higher wages. Center for Arts and Culture, we do need things that are more than just what some will say the private sector would provide completely by itself. And coming from a bit of a center-right political background myself, after studying it, and especially Phoenix, it made me realize there's so many things that make an economy tick. In fact, I had to retire a slide because people were making fun of it for a little bit too long, where I had one of those old-fashioned stereo equalizers where you slide the dials up and down, and I labeled one transportation investment, another one tax policy, and I said to get the right sound in economic development, you have to slide these things. Some cost more, some cost less, but you have to find the right balance. Well, arts and culture is part of that balance. Sports, tourism, and other visitors. There's a lot going on in this space, and probably the thing that I took away from this study the most is the ability and the coordination among the different entities here. There's going to be a big movement at the state level where we're going to make an attempt to try to go back to formula funding for the Office of Tourism with more money being spent at the local level. There's also going to be some efforts to try to get more of the smaller events that tend to get ignored but have really large economic impacts. Well, we've already discussed with DPI having the golf cart tour, and once we identify this huge list of demand for different events, they basically have a list of supply of locations where they could be hosted. These are the things that are important, and so when you have these organizations that start to coordinate more, because you see all of the economic success from the coordination, you have the bigger economic impacts, and then you have even more opportunities going forward. So we have some pretty large estimates that I'll show you in a minute, but I think it doesn't represent what's going to happen going forward with the right public policy and the right leadership with the city and the state as a whole. And it is important for us to have opportunities to work, live, and play. Now, you're never going to have a situation where you're going to have every amenity in a downtown area. That's just not going to work. It's not going to be economically efficient, but it is possible to have some. I like the fact that we do have more housing. When we started working with the city many years ago, the key was volume. The first item was, how do we get a university campus down here? And then how do we maintain additional sports activities? What do we need to do? Do we break the rule on economic development and try to subsidize some retail because otherwise it wouldn't be there? All of those discussions happened and a lot of momentum occurred. But now things are taking off, and I liken it to kind of building a car. Early on, when we realized our economy wasn't as diverse after the Great Recession, and that even went into the next decade a little bit, we realized that we had to do things differently. So we basically built this vehicle. Now we're at the point where we're fine-tuning it. And the great thing is the numbers for all the different communities here, especially Phoenix, are very strong. And we haven't even taken advantage of all of our opportunities. Some of our competitor communities that are still a little bit higher than us on per capita personal income statistics, things like that, they're already maxing out. We still can make improvements. So that's why I'm more optimistic about this region than any other in the country. Now, in terms of economic activity, this is just a volume of activity for 2022, about 24,000 residents, almost 2,000 business establishments, 65,000 non-construction jobs, and about 6 million visitors. When you're dealing with numbers like this, and then you convert it into economic and fiscal impacts, you're dealing with really big numbers. I don't know about you, but I don't open up my checkbook and look at it and say, well, I'm off a few dollars. It should have said $987 million on it. That's just, you don't really have good perspective when you're dealing with these huge numbers, so you have to put it in the right context. And so when you convert that into tax revenue, I think it's a little bit easier to see how these economic activity items convert. So in terms of construction, over 2,000 multifamily units, 240 student housing units, and 100,000 square feet of retail space. There's a question about what kind of multifamily units are being built. It's predominantly the less affordable ones. What happens is we're in a situation because of a lot of other reasons where the affordable housing projects aren't penciling out, and you're not seeing those. So we're seeing what potentially could turn into a little bit of a glut in terms of the very expensive apartments. But unlike what happened after the Great Recession, when we built way too much, if we're building a lot of these units and we're short on housing, what you're going to see is some of these more expensive units will come down in price. But do we want to wait 3 or 4 years for that to naturally happen? I think that we need to take more action early on, and how you do it is you have a strong economy, you build off of something like what you're seeing in downtown Phoenix, and you try to expand that economic opportunity throughout this immediate region, but then the broader region as well. In terms of the calculations, you always look at the immediate impact for a particular business, and then you look at how there's suppliers for a business. Well, we treated this as the direct impact was really the downtown defined area, and then you have a lot of other impacts go throughout Phoenix as a whole. So questions about why do you invest in downtown and not some other areas? Everybody benefits from this economic activity. In terms of some of the dollars, $21 billion in economic output. Whenever you hear economic output, just think of like a GDP number for a particular project. That's a large number. $8.6 billion in personal income, and 635 million in tax revenues, and that's state, local, so that's state, county, city. These are very large numbers, and I feel like this doesn't necessarily represent what's going to be happening next, because some of the unicorn projects that I think are going to be happening that we already know some of them are happening, like CAMI, we're going to see more of those, and eventually your downtown definition will have to expand a little bit, because you're going to have high wage jobs that cross those boundaries, and they'll have to expand if things are managed well and you continue to have support from the highest level, from the mayor's office all the way down to those that work on housing affordability and all the other departments. In terms of tax revenue, $426 million for the state of Arizona, $90 million for Maricopa County, $118 for the city of Phoenix. Whenever the state comes back and says, well, we think we're having some budget problems, maybe we need to cut back on some revenue, that gets distributed. One, that's going to be very difficult to do. We work with the League of Cities, and we were able to successfully defend maintaining some of the revenue, or a lot of the revenue for the cities, because that's where a lot of the economic development activity happens. Cities invest more in economic development than the state as a whole does. But what you offer provides the state a lot of a lot of fiscal revenue that they use to help try to balance their budgets. We have to remind them on a regular basis that the cities are net contributors to what they collect at the state. The state isn't this phantom separate entity. The cities make up the state. So a lot of that messaging has to continue to occur. But in terms of downtown, these numbers are very impressive. These numbers are larger than I thought they were going to be. And we did the analysis. I had to double check with one of my colleagues, who is never wrong on his economic analyses, but I had him do it twice because I thought the numbers were a little bit big. And in fact, they ended up being a little bit conservative for a number of reasons. And this is one of the reasons why. We think that we're going to see the downtown employment base continue to increase at times where others are going to be shrinking. And this is because of this economic momentum, high wage jobs. Yes, there's tourism activity, sports activity, but biotech, all these other ones that you've worked very hard on are going to be adding a lot of jobs. We did the analysis for U of A's CAMI Research Center that will be located down here, and that to assist with trying to get a state grant to support the project. And so we did a lot of detail on this project. And this alone, we're talking about 7,500 to 9,000 new jobs, and then there's a lot of secondary jobs, and 75% of the CAMI project, even though it's a U of A project, it really is for the region. In fact, that's another nice thing that we're seeing. The labels for the universities are disappearing a little bit because there's more collaboration by industry. This isn't in a forecast. We didn't do a forecast. We did a snapshot on where you stand now. Typically, you would look at the historical data, and it would you would extend it based on some reasonable trend. We couldn't do that with what's happening downtown because you have all of these steps, these huge steps where additional activity could be occurring. You couldn't have gotten there without being aggressive with downtown over the last decade. You can't just suddenly change public policy and overnight you produce these numbers. This is something that had to have been sustained for a while, and there had to have been a focus. Not everybody needs to agree on everything, but everybody has been talking about how we need to bring in the higher wage jobs, more here than I've seen in other communities throughout the state where we also work. So this is really a model, and especially downtown, of how you can build a high quality center within a community that can be diverse. It isn't just dominated by some restaurants and some entertainment options. There's a lot of different things, and it's a nice blend, and you made it work. And like I opened with, in some cases you had to be very aggressive with the economic development policies. But back then, when we first started talking and I was questioning whether or not the city should be getting involved in these things in downtown, when I met some friends for happy hour and I parked my car on one of the side streets, I was wondering if my car was going to be there when we were done. Now I don't have that concern. There's people all over the place. There's a lot of housing. I love it seeing some of those bikes where they put those little neon lights on them, and it looks neat. It just has a vibe of a community where you would go on vacation. That's what I think has been missing in the state. There's a lot to do here. Sons and Mercury headquarters, just as another example. You can go through and there's dozens of different projects moving forward that would be on top of the current growth that we're already seeing. And that's why I feel like the forecast for where you're going is going to put some pressure on infrastructure, and it's going to put some pressure on identifying new areas like the warehouse district, things like that. But the revenue that comes in from these projects more than pays for that. These are high return on investment projects. These are projects that the economic development activity that comes from it, that generates the revenue, sometimes can exceed the initial cost 2, 3, or 4 times over. If you're running a small business and somebody said, would you like to reinvest one of your $1 of profit and then get $3 in profit back the next year? Of course you'd jump on that. That's a huge return. That's what we're seeing with some of these projects. And so unlike a lot of other projects where we sometimes have to come in and we don't have a chance to present because we identify that a community maybe isn't doing as solid of a job as they normally do, this one it wasn't a surprise, but it was nice to work on because the information has been very positive. Now, there are things that everybody needs to work on, because when we were talking about economic development in Phoenix, we did a show, we did Horizon, because a lot of policymakers watch that show. And who did we do the show with? We did it with Chris, Economic Development Director. There's all these overlaps within the city that allows us to be able to talk to economic development, talk to people like Debney, talk to others, talk to you all, because everybody here is understanding how these things are interconnected. That's what made these numbers so large. That's what's going to make them continue. But it's embracing how you can not just collect data, but how can you use it to influence public policy going forward? And I'm hoping that the city will be interested in maybe working with us on some brainstorming ideas as we look into affordable housing, as we look into homelessness, as we look into even the foster care system. All of these different things have impacts that roll over into economic development, all the different things that you're working on. And I just think the city of Phoenix is in a position where it could be an outstanding partner in helping with some policy formation going forward. So I know that was a little off topic, but to me, this kind of data is produced to help you identify what you can get done. The goal wasn't to produce a report. The goal was to produce a report that will help something get implemented. Additional housing built, more economic development downtown, more investment in infrastructure. The goal is after the report. And I'm hoping that this can be a piece of what you're using as you continue to try to expand downtown, but also other parts of the city and improve the lives of residents in the aggregate. And so at the very beginning, there was a slide that said we need all these different things in a well-built community. Hit the checkbox on all of them. Very impressed. Any questions?
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I think one of the important things to note is as we look at the revenue that is generated in downtown, that revenue doesn't just stay in downtown. It goes into the budgets that you all work towards each and every year and moves throughout all of our citizens, all of our council districts. So the investments that we make in downtown really do make a difference in all 517 square miles of Phoenix. So Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, and it was a very impressive presentation. So I'll see if any of my colleagues have any questions. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. And as a downtown resident, I love to see all of the impact of this growth. One small question. So the population size, it's 23,900, I believe, total residents. That's grown about, it's doubled in size. Is that over the last 5 years or 10 years?
Oh, I would have to double check that. Just
Okay.
given how things slowed during COVID, it's probably somewhere in between, right?
Vice Mayor, Chairman, Vice Mayor, being the numbers girl, Jim and I work closely together, but we went back and as we've looked at the numbers, and Ms. Marley and I are always working on those numbers together. In 2014, we had about 10,000 people who lived in downtown Phoenix. So that just kind of sets the stage for you in moving forward. So we've doubled and a half in just 9 years.
And do you anticipate that same rate of growth in terms of population size moving forward, or less, more?
Chairman, Vice Mayor, as we look at what's under construction, as we look at, as Mr. Round stated, downtown really isn't this linear thing between the threes anymore. It's busting outside of the sevens. We're moving into Grand Avenue. We're moving east into Eastlake and the Garfield area with the residential. I would make a bold prediction that we will see the same type of growth over the next 9 years that we've seen over the previous 9 years. And then we're start to reach critical mass and capacity as to the available land sites that are available, for development and that type of a thing. But in the downtown proper, I would argue that we'll see probably the same type of growth over the next 9 to 10 years.
Okay.
And on that real quick, Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor, because we're going to have so many additional new job opportunities, and again, what Chris just said, going beyond 7 and 7, there are going to be opportunities for additional population growth, and that's what's going to differentiate this region from a lot of others. You're going to see growth in jobs slow a little bit across the state as we go into a mild recession, and then as we start to grow again, we'll have some great opportunities. But the job growth in this area appears to be so strong and robust, there will be housing opportunities, but I still envision the downtown area being redefined. If we come back in another 2 or 3 years and update this study, I imagine that we're probably going to have to redefine the maps a little bit, because there's going to be a lot of additional activity in there. And when you bring in the jobs, you bring in the people. We're not just importing people and hoping jobs are being created. You all are working very hard on the job end, which means you get first stab at trying to locate a lot of those employees in the local area.
Chairman, Vice Mayor, in fact, that's my favorite slide of the whole presentation, is 10,700 new jobs for downtown Phoenix. My hands down favorite slide.
And on that, and that's great. And so I'm wondering if, I feel like I kind of have a sense of, we're obviously very strong in bioscience and healthcare in downtown. When you think of certain other downtowns across the country, you can kind of think of those like anchor companies that are, whether it's Amazon in Seattle or Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. Is healthcare and bioscience what you see as Phoenix's thing for downtown, or is there other, what would you say are like the few industries that we're really targeting, or are we looking to bring a big, an additional anchor to our downtown that really brands us in that way?
Chairman, Vice Mayor, as we look at downtown, of course, biosciences and healthcare have been a strong focus of this city's, going back to the biosciences roadmap in 2001 and coming forward. Huge for us. As you look at the density of research scientists across the entire state, there's no greater density than there is here in downtown Phoenix, and that's including our universities. So I think that's a great thing for us. But as we look at the other types of companies that are here that are noteworthy in downtown today and where we'd like to go to, you see cyber and software, and of course on the economic modeling, you've got Deloitte that's here, you've got Ernst & Young, you've got others that are here in downtown Phoenix. So I think those are kind of in the cyber realm, in the software realm, in the online platforms are big for us. But I don't disagree with you. As you know, our large financial institutions went for the suburbs a few years ago, and they're more in the traditional suburban type markets now. So replacing those with those brand names on the buildings and identifying downtown as that place. We do see over the next couple of years, we have a great number of opportunities with the 101 building and with Chase. You've been working diligently with us on the Chase building. But our vacancy rate, interestingly enough, in downtown, even with the exodus of those two large financial institutions, has really stayed static, unlike other large downtowns across the country that they've seen gluts of sublease space through the pandemic. They've seen their vacancy rate skyrocket. Downtown has stayed pretty static, and in fact, we've located a number of companies, as you know, here. We have Quicken and we have Rocket Mortgage, and we have those that are here as well. So I would say that, yes, going after a couple of brand names that all of a sudden become synonymous with downtown Phoenix will complement what we have here today.
And one example of that, and I'm not envious. I know San Francisco is going through a very difficult time right now with the big exodus from their downtown, and it's wonderful that we have seen the opposite of that. But one example of that I heard of recently was the company TikTok. They relocated from San Francisco to Seattle and are actually paying all of their employees for that move. So I guess just flagging that to say that I think there's a lot of opportunity right now for Phoenix to try to, intentionally attract some of these companies that may want to be leaving the Bay Area or other more expensive markets. And I think that would continue to help us become an attractive city to young people across the country.
Thank you for that.
Other questions? Okay. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Truly appreciated it. But let me ask one question, and I was a little hesitant to ask it, but I think you answered portions of it. The one slide you showed was on the winning formula, and I don't want you to divulge, say anything that you shouldn't say, but what are we missing? In the winning formula, we have a hub for economic activities, center for arts, host to sports and tourism, work, live, play, and a learn environment. What would you say, just more out of curiosity than anything else, what are we missing? Or what would you like to see added? Maybe that's a better question. What would you like to see added to between the sevens in the downtown area?
Chairman, I'll start and then turn it over to my colleagues for their comments. But for economic development, for our team, for me, that thing that we're missing is retail. The retail was here with Arizona Center in the 1980s and 1990s. It was ahead of its time. You had clothing stores, you had shoe stores, you had kind of that destination retail. We're missing soft goods. You've got 23,000 people who live down here now and 15,000 students. You're missing that place that they can go grab, that thing that they need, and we're working diligently with a couple of retail providers that are those signature retail providers for this particular area. But today I had an unfortunate incident with my shirt that luckily we had stuff to clean it up on the 20th floor. But if we hadn't, I had no place I could run to quickly to grab another shirt. I have no place and I've done this before, I've gotten to work without my shoes. I have no place to be able to go grab shoes. So those things that our residents are looking for, if I need a pot to put a plant in on my balcony, I have to leave downtown to go get that. So the things that you need for your daily activity in your daily life, I think are things that we are intimately focused on right now. And to my mind, those are the single largest thing that we're missing to make downtown even more livable. When we worked with Red in 2017 to go after the grocery store for downtown. And we did a study at that time. Red Development funded the study that we did at that time that showed how much people find a market more livable and can see themselves there once there's a grocery store. It was dead spot on. Could not have been more factual and accurate. But the study was even more interesting than that. I won't go into today. But now our studies are showing that livability needs to be that destination retail, those things that you need every day. Devney?
Sure. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, could not agree more. The non-food and beverage retail is desperately needed for those who are living and working and going to school in downtown. I would just add to that the family-friendly components, the programming, the infrastructure, so that downtown remains a downtown for everybody, for families who want to live downtown, come downtown with their children to have those activities and amenities available to them. And then the housing piece that's been talked about throughout this meeting, making sure that downtown remains affordable or can become affordable for everyone, so those who live downtown can live downtown if they want to.
Mr. Chairman, members, I think in many cases it's okay if you don't have retail just strewn throughout downtown as long as it's nearby. What'll probably happen is that you'll have a lot of concentration of these high-tech type businesses. People used to think about industrial as in a huge location with 500-600 square feet per person. Now you're seeing these basically industrial biotech and software engineering businesses in what looks like office buildings. Those are things that can work downtown. But that perimeter just around the downtown area is probably going to develop more as more income comes into the area. And so people may have to, it's difficult to be able to say, I can walk everywhere. Like if you go to a big city and there's always a little grocery store every 3 or 4 corners and you can pick up basic stuff. You may not necessarily have that just because of how we developed, but more will develop around that next ring. And then there'll be additional businesses that'll continue to grow. In fact, I imagine that second ring, where we're going to eventually be expanding the downtown ring, that'll probably be more diverse than downtown, because that'll have some of these new businesses, and it'll have some of the retail establishments where there already are some. There'll have to be some preservation programs and things like that, but that one might end up being very diverse. And so when you say just downtown and we define it with a boundary, the numbers don't look as good. But when you think downtown like the typical person, where they don't necessarily say, if I'm on one side of 7th or I'm on the other side, I'm not downtown, there's probably going to be additional upgrades. You're going to see property tax collections escalate because there's going to be a lot of enhancement to the projects. And I think that that's going to generate the revenue for you to be very creative with some other economic development programs too. So again, if you keep balancing these high ROI projects to pay for what you need to do to create these high ROI projects as a business would, there's really no limit in what you can create here.
And Chairman, if I could just add one thing onto that secondary ring, Councilman Stark is working with us right now and has identified an opportunity for us that is kind of that secondary ring at 7th Avenue in Washington. You've got all of the state workers, the county workers, our own city staff that live in that I say live because I feel like I live at work most of the time, but are in that direction. But they have to walk all the way down to 3rd or to Central to get something for lunch. And so we're missing that gap of things even as they're pulling in that direction. And Councilman Stark, putting on her former planner hat for us, has been helping us look at some of those secondary rings as opportunities on city-owned properties for future requests for proposals.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciated it. Okay. Next, we move to item 11 for discussion and possible action. Chris Mackey will now be joined by Gretchen Wolf and Xander Keating.
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we're going to move quickly through this item that's up for you today. Every other year, we come forward to the subcommittee. As you know, the city owns a number of properties across the city, and each of our departments that Economic Development works closely with works to attract the great projects to make sure this is a quality, sustainable city. As we look at options and opportunities to issue requests for proposals, we want to make sure that we stay in lockstep with what our subcommittee is thinking, properties that are of importance to you. What I do want to mention as we walk through these properties, I do want to mention that this is just a very high-level focus today. We will come back to you with each and every property individually for your individual vote to take them out for a request for proposal. And that will be following a diligent community effort. That'll be following a diligent planning effort when we get our appraisals done, when we work with our planning and development department, who is always instrumental in helping provide us guidance in streets and others. So I don't want you to think that you're doing a broad brush stroke on all of these properties today. We have work that has to be done with the Federal Transit Authority. We have studies that are underway on some of them with our transit department on high capacity transit. But just wanted to get you thinking about the properties that we think would be good over the next 24 months to issue for RFP. As mentioned, Xander Keating, Deputy Director of Community Development, is with me, as well as Gretchen Wolf, Special Projects Administrator over all things procurement.
Drive. It's okay. Thank you. Morning, Mr. Chair, subcommittee members. I'm excited to bring you an update about some of the properties we talked about a year ago when we came and gave this update. The Four Corners RFP, so this is 24th Street and Broadway Road, the southwest corner. We issued this RFP in October. We had a pre-proposal meeting and proposals are due January 12th. The solicitation transparency policy is in place for this since it's been issued. Will stay in place until you, the council, award a successful proposer, or should there be a need to cancel the RFP, which means all proposer inquiries need to go to the assigned procurement officer. 2nd Street near Roosevelt, this is just north of Roosevelt. At the time we prepared the presentation, we promised we would issue it in November. I'm excited to tell you we did issue. We issued on the 6th. Very excited about that. A lot of interest in this. We issued on the 6th, and we had people registering for the pre-proposal meeting already. The transparency policy is also in place for this RFP now. And then finally, First Street and McKinley. We talked about that a year ago, and that RFP is in development. So we'll continue to move those forward, and as we have recommendations, bring them back to you for your consideration. Handing to you.
All right, Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm going to go through some of the sites that we're looking at pretty quickly. Please feel free to ask any questions as we're going through these. The first site is at 19th Avenue and Dunlap. It's the southwest corner. It's a little bit over 10 acres of a site. It's currently the end-of-line park and ride location. With the extension to Metro Center, this will no longer be the end of line, and so the amount of space that we have here isn't going to be needed here soon. Owned by the Public Transit Department, so we will work with them as well as some other sister departments on what the ultimate development looks like at that location. This site is included within the Housing Phoenix plan as well, so of course we'll be working with the Housing Department on that piece. 19th Avenue and Montebello, this is the southeast corner. This was the original end of line for the light rail. As you can see from the photo, it's no longer the end of the line, and the parking use there or demand there is not quite what was originally anticipated now that extension has continued further north. Also a little bit over 10 acres, as I noted, original end of line, also owned by the Public Transit Department, so we'll be working with them very closely on this site as well.
Just, Chairman, if I might, on that particular site, this site is under a high-speed capacity transit study right now by our transit department, the 35th Avenue study that you're all familiar with. So this one will be some time. We just wanted to get the council thinking about this one. This one will be some time since it's under that study.
Next is another public transit site. This is at the northwest corner of Central and Broadway. A little bit over 3.5 acres, so a little bit smaller of a site. It does have the Ed Pastor Transit Center on the site, which is a historic building that would need to be incorporated into a future development at the location. Also owned by the Public Transit Department. With the extension of light rail along South Central, the operations at this site will look very different, and we no longer need quite the amount of space. So we'll be looking at a disposition on this site as well. Right across the street from the last one, southeast corner of Central on Broadway, is a similar size site, a little bit under 4 acres. This one is owned by the Neighborhood Services Department, also included in the Housing Phoenix plan. So we'll be working with multiple departments on disposition of this particular location. And then we have 13th Street. There's actually 2 sites, one on Washington and one on Jefferson. The Washington site, which is sort of kind of in the center of that map there, it's owned by the Neighborhood Services Department, approximately 3.7 acres. This one has a building on the site, but we'd be looking at disposition here. And then the other site, same exact size, owned by the Aviation Department, and looking at some disposition on that site as well. And then the final location is at 14th Street in Jefferson. This is actually 2 properties. They're not contiguous, a little bit over an acre of a site. At this location, we did go through an RFP process for this site a few years ago. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. Unfortunately, that process did not work out, and so we're looking at moving forward with additional disposition.
And Chairman, members of the subcommittee, this property, the council had given us authority to take out for a public offering. Once we've gone through the request for proposal process, the way that we go through it, we are allowed then to go for public offering, which the council did agree to. As we came for public offering, this property was still restricted under the 163 study that was going on by Aviation, so it was a not greater than a 50-year lease only when we came to council to be able to take it out. That restriction's been removed, so the property can now be sold. And the 5 respondents that we thought we would hear from on this property, when we did an exit interview with each of them, they all said the fact that the property was for lease, and so oddly shaped was the restriction as to why they didn't respond. taking this property out for sale now will be, I think will free us up and will bring in some great projects. We will be coming forward for council's authorization to take it out for sale on your December 6th agenda. And with that, Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we do request the subcommittee's recommendation approval for disposition of our city properties. Again, we will come forward to you with each and every property individually. This is just a broad brush overview to make sure that we don't come forward with a property 6 months from now and you say, my goodness, what were you thinking? We don't have an intention of disposing of that property.
Thank you very much for the presentation. At this point, I'll go ahead and open the floor for any questions or any discussion. Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Chris obviously will stay at the table. For the next item, number 12, she'll be joined by Nathan Wright. All yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, our final item today is a request for authorization to enter into a development agreement for public infrastructure on 2 properties, both controlled by IDM, which is a great development partner of the city that has the same vision of the city, flex tech, development type projects. As Councilman Hodge Washington knows, we work closely with IDM on her site, Vice Mayor Yu as well, in Levine, bringing forward the South Mountain Science and Technology Park, but now also adding into it Loop 101, which is the Shealy Farms property between just south of Thomas on the west side of the 101. As Chairman mentioned, with me today is Nathan Wright. He's Deputy Director over Business Attraction. He's going to move through the terms of a potential public infrastructure very quickly to keep us on track with our scheduled time today. Nathan?
Thank you, Chris. As Chris mentioned, IDM, great company. They've been very active in our market over the past several years. We're very aligned with them. They're very adept at taking down large tracts of land along our freeways. Currently, these sites are farmland, and there's no infrastructure, and it's very costly with the cost of capital and the fluctuations in the market right now, making it very challenging for developers. And we know there's a significant need for jobs, and 90% of our companies that locate here in Phoenix that we assist, they go into existing buildings, making us very focused on making sure that we have the right stock for these companies and choices, as well as retail. Preventing retail leakage into the, along the borders of our city is very important. And you heard enough about housing today, so I won't talk about that.
And Chairman, if I might, just put a fine point on the cost of infrastructure. Typically, on most sites, you're going to see $3 to $5 per square foot for cost of public infrastructure that goes in. On some of our greenfield sites in the far western portions of our city, we're seeing those public infrastructure numbers come in anywhere from $18 to $20 a square foot. They can be peanut buttered over single-family residential or multifamily to make those numbers work, but for economic development, creating those destination locations in each of our villages where our citizens can work in the same village they live is critically important, and we are working diligently with our development partners and with you to ensure that those projects can make financial sense for everyone.
That's exactly, Chris made my point. This statistic that just popped up, 60% of our West Valley workforce commutes to other regions for work. That's exactly why we're focused on bringing high-wage employers here in the West Phoenix area. As Chris mentioned, IDM, they're headquartered in Vancouver, Washington, just across the river from Portland. They have an Arizona office. They're great to work with. Jeff Gordon and his team. Jordan Gaither, the Director of Construction, is here today. They're very busy doing multiple multifamily projects around the city and around the valley, as well as retail and industrial projects. They do a great job, and they have a project in Vancouver, Washington called the Columbia Tech Center. We'd love to bring that here in Phoenix. And if you know anything about that area, there's a TSMC campus up there, there's an Intel campus, and just all the right pieces. And they're really focused on bringing those high-wage employers that you guys spoke about earlier. The first agreement that I'll touch on is the Shealy Loop 202. Back in 2002, when this freeway opened, ADOT had to value engineer out some infrastructure, which was a sleeve for a water line to go underneath here. And Chris can tell you a long list of projects that came and went because they didn't have the time or the money to bore underneath the freeway. Well, a few years ago, IDM approached us, and it was the right time and the right place, and they worked really closely with our water department to engineer this water line that went underneath the freeway, really opening up this area. And their multifamily project is currently under construction. Soon after that, they took down 111 acres, and they're working on this phase one. We're very pleased to see this project that includes retail, because this is an area of our city that experiences a lot of retail leakage. But they're bringing in this flex tech product, looking for these high wage employers along this area. But this is a very expensive, behind on the slides here. The cost for public infrastructure is over $26 million for improvements to Thomas and 99th Avenue. And there's additional projects coming in the corridor that we're really excited about. And moving over to the Loop 202, IDM also took down 63 acres, another mixed-use project that includes residential, neighborhood, retail, and industrial. And as we've been in meetings with Councilwoman Hodge Washington and Vice Mayor Ansari, we've really heard from the community a desire for more and a variety of restaurants and also smaller scale suites for offices and things. And that's what's exactly going to be happening here. We're really excited. Over 500,000 square feet of Class A and Flex Tech space. And improvements here on Elliott Road and Carver Road, and those connections will be over $16 million. The business terms, the IDM will construct this public infrastructure, including the streets, water, sewer lines, and sidewalks. And the city will then reimburse them a portion of the construction and lease tax over 10 years, and we'll cap that at $10 million for the Shealy side and $4 million for this side. With that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, staff does recommend approval on both items. They are two separate items. One would be for the recommended development agreement and the terms proposed move forward to the full council on the Shealy property. The other would be on the Envision 202 property. And with that, we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much, and I apologize. I should have introduced both items 12 and 13 at the same time. So with that having been said, I'll open the floor to any additional questions or comments from anyone. Being none? Okay. Do I have a motion then, or is it necessary?
Move to approve?
Second.
Okay, there is a motion. And a second. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, none. It carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Chairman, yes. We have
two
items.
Separate motions?
We have to vote, yeah.
Okay, I apologize for that. We have one. Okay. Then for the second motion, for the second item, do I have a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
Okay. All right. We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Apologize for the mix-up. The last item today is a call to the public. Do we have any registered speakers?
Mr. Chairman, we have no members of the public.
Okay, then I will not read the admonition. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear everything.
There are no members of the public for comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologize for that. Okay, last thing we have to do is any requests for any future agenda items from any of my colleagues?
I have one.
As Vice Mayor.
So I have a constituent, I'm going to read this, interested in exploring additional protections to address the issue of abusive and predatory landlords, specifically related to repeat violations of city code and/or health and safety standards. And this is specifically for single-family properties. And I will follow up with staff with more details about that, and with you as well, Chairman. Yes, specifically related to repeat violations of city code and/or health and safety standards, oversight and accountability for individuals or investors who choose to lease their single-family properties, based on some constituent feedback. Thank you.
With that, before we completely adjourn, looking at the items for December, we have item number 1 is a Human Services Campus Engagement Efforts Update. That's going to go to policy, so we don't have to worry so much about that one. And then the second one, Office of Innovation, the City Manager's Performance Dashboard Update. That is something we can push until January, Mr.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. With that, why don't we I'll make the decision now to go ahead and cancel December's subcommittee meeting so that people can clear up their calendars and know what's going on for there. And we have other future agenda items plus the ones that were just added. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
de Phoenix en octubre de 1992, para luego ser ajustado en marzo del 2004.
I think when you